This program is provided by Universal Genesis.
So, we're always taught that philosophy, especially Western philosophy, is this noble quest for truth, right?
Yeah, that's the story. A singular, detached search for some kind of absolute universal idea that's supposed to elevate all of humanity.
The story you get in Philosophy 101.
Exactly. It's the story we tell ourselves in the textbooks.
Yeah.
But the sources we've gathered for this deep dive suggest we should probably just throw that entire idea out.
Right. And that's our mission for today. We're not here to, venerate the history of philosophy. We want to reread it. We're going to analyze it not as this grand quest for truth, but as a surprisingly effective technique. A technique for hiding personal motive.
And a method for converting your own ambition into a language that sounds universal. Undeniable, even.
We're stripping away the ivy, the academic robes, all of the reverence.
And the central question guiding our analysis is, well, it's simple. Maybe a little ruthless.
What is it?
What did these thinkers really want? I mean, what was the specific, immediate problem they were trying to solve for themselves or for their careers or their nation?
And we've actually pulled a pretty brilliant analytical framework from the sources that lets us dissect just about any philosophical argument, from the 17th century all the way to today. It just lays the mechanics bare.
Yeah, what's the structure we're using?
It's a three-step operation, and what's fascinating is that it just repeats and refines itself throughout history.
Okay, so the first step, you have to identify the real motive or purpose.
The personal stake.
The personal stake, the political emergency, the career ambition. You could call it the Han, the true, unvarnished desire that's really driving the thinking.
That deep internal thing that you need to protect or legitimize.
Right. Then second, you look at the universal language or pretense. This is the camouflage.
Yeah.
It's the nicely sounding, undeniable, emotionally charged word.
Like what?
Reason, freedom, God's will, justice.
The axiom that nobody can argue against.
Exactly. And third, you look for the self-justification. This is the rhetorical move, where the philosopher uses that universal language to make their personal claim seem not just okay, but absolutely necessary.
Or even inevitable for all humanity.
Yeah, and philosophy history, when you look at it through this lens, is simply the repetition and refinement of this three-step strategic operation.
Okay, let's just apply this frame immediately. I think it'll make more sense with examples. Let's start with the early modern thinkers. This is where you can really see these individual personal agendas dictating what we now call universal axioms.
Let's start with René Descartes.
The official father of modern philosophy.
Yeah, and when you look at him through this frame, the brilliance of his strategy is just, it's startling.
So what was his real motive? I mean, it wasn't just abstract mathematics.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
His motive. Descartes was living right in the aftermath of Galileo's persecution by the church. He desperately wanted to pursue science, mathematics, physics, but he needed an ironclad defense against the religious authorities.
His whole intellectual life was on the line.
His life, maybe even his physical safety. So he needed a universal language so powerful that it made his physics completely immune to the Inquisition. What did he land on?
Universal language. God exists.
Yes, but more critically, God guarantees human reason. Reason itself is divinely secured. It's inherently trustworthy because God made it that way.
Wait, that's brilliant. So by making reason divine, any attack on his math is basically an attack on God's design.
It's intellectual jujitsu.
Wow.
Precisely. And the self-justification becomes airtight. Therefore, his mathematical and physical work, his science, is safe. It's not a rebellion against the church. It's just the inevitable operation of God-given reason.
He protected his personal work by wrapping it in the banner of divine necessity.
That is a powerful shield. So if Descartes built an intellectual shield, the next logical step was to build a political foundation.
Which brings us to John Locke. Locke, the philosophical founder of liberal democracy. But what was his real political motive?
Well, his motive was incredibly specific to his time. Motive. Locke was writing during the Glorious Revolution. A huge political upheaval, the king was overthrown. He did not believe in the divine right of kings or hereditary bloodlines. He urgently needed a philosophical structure to legitimize the new post-revolution political order in England.
Okay, so to get rid of inherited status, he needed a concept that guaranteed everyone was equal at birth.
And he found one, universal language. The human mind is a tabula rasa, a blank slate. We are born without any innate ideas.
And why was the blank slate so politically devastating?
Because it just destroys the foundation of aristocracy and inherited power. If we all start as a blank slate, then the political justification is crystal clear. Birthright, inherited status, divine favor, none of that exists as a legitimate political claim.
So if we all start equal,
Then politics must be a chosen, explicit social contract between equals. It's a beautiful, universal argument built entirely to justify one very specific political outcome: the new regime.
you can see how fast the philosophical argument becomes a tool for a concrete political goal.
So now let's move to David Hume, the great skeptic. With Hume, the motive becomes, well, almost purely personal ambition.
Oh, absolutely. Motive. Hume was ambitious. He wanted to make his mark, he wanted to stand out, and he wanted to overturn all existing philosophical complacency. He needed to establish himself as the sharpest mind of his time. He needed to get noticed.
And his universal claim to do that had to be as disruptive as possible.
Maximum disruption, universal language. Everything we know derives solely from sensory experience, and most famously, causality. The idea that A causes B isn't a necessary connection, it's just a habit of the mind. We just get used to seeing A followed by B. That's it.
So the most celebrated skeptic of his time was just using doubt to promote his personal brand. How did he weaponize that uncertainty?
The self-justification is just pure ego. Therefore, philosophical certainty doesn't exist. Everything is shaky. And because he's the only one smart enough and honest enough to point this out, he is, by definition, the most intellectually sound figure in the room. He used radical doubt to cement his own certainty in the philosophical hierarchy.
Exactly.
This is where it gets really interesting, because now we see the scope of the motive expand beyond the personal. It stops being about Descartes' safety or Hume's fame and starts incorporating national societal needs. The self-justification becomes more refined, grander,
And much more demanding. This is German idealism. It's the refinement phase. The moment the philosopher becomes a kind of national moral engineer.
Let's start with Immanuel Kant, the towering figure of morality. What was the crisis he was trying to solve?
Motive. Kant was living in a time when German thought was at risk of being swallowed whole by British empirical science like Hume's, or totally overwhelmed by French political radicalism. He really believed that Germany needed its own unique, absolute foundation of morality to hold itself together.
And his response was this ultimate universal principle designed to be completely independent of experience or consequence.
The categorical imperative.
Yeah.
Universal language. Act only such that the maxim of your action could, through your will, become a principle of universal legislation.
So basically, could I want this action to be a law for everyone, everywhere?
That's the test. It sounds noble, but that massive universal idea served his national motive and became his self-justification.
How so?
He used it to define what freedom is. Freedom, for Kant, is obeying this morality, obeying the universal law we set for ourselves. If you aren't perfectly moral, you aren't truly free. And crucially, philosophy is the appointed steward, the manager of this very demanding moral structure.
He made his national intellectual need into humanity's inescapable duty.
Right. And moving on to Fichte, we see that moral duty get put into active service. His motives were much more immediate, even aggressive. They were tied to national survival.
Motive. Fichte was writing just after the French had completely crushed Germany. He was doubly aware of the national defeat, the exhaustion. His goal wasn't just moral structure. He desperately wanted to rebuild a broken nation, to inspire citizens to immediate, unyielding action.
His philosophy was basically a national pep rally.
So he needed a universal language of pure, self-generating action.
Which he found. Universal language. The self posits itself, the ego posits the ego, pure, self-creating, active existence.
Which leads to a very sharp, almost militaristic self-justification aimed right at the average citizen.
Therefore, one must act. Existence is defined by action, by resistance. Those who do not act, who stay passive, who don't contribute to rebuilding the nation, those people are not truly the self. It's a philosophical command to mobilize, just dressed up as high metaphysics.
And finally, we get to the peak of this refinement, G.W.F. Hegel. The ambition here isn't just national anymore, it's total intellectual domination.
Hegel wanted to be the ultimate authority in everything, motive. He wanted his philosophical system to be so totalizing, so complete, that it literally became synonymous with the state, with the mind of history, with reality itself.
And he used a truly massive, overwhelming, universal concept to pull this off.
Universal language. Truth is the whole.
That's it.
That's it. Anything that's partial, anything that's incomplete is therefore untrue.
Wait, that sounds more like a tautology than a philosophical system.
But that's the genius of the self-justification. If you read his incredibly complex system, the phenomenology of spirit, and you can't understand it, or you disagree with it, it's not because he's wrong. It's because you are merely a partial perspective.
Wow.
His system is the whole. Any criticism you have is just a temporary, immature failure of vision on your part, which the system will eventually overcome anyway. Dissent is automatically categorized as intellectual immaturity.
That is the most magnificent self-justification ever invented. It makes the philosopher immune to all criticism.
It does.
So when you look at all these examples, from Descartes' fear to Hegel's desire to become the state, it becomes so clear. The history of philosophy isn't the progress of truth.
No, it's the history of the refinement of self-justification. The personal or national motive always drives the process, and the universal language is just constructed afterward to make that motive seem inevitable for everybody.
And this clarity leads us to a deeper, more structural insight about what philosophy even is. When you use this frame, you start to realize philosophy has only really played two major roles throughout its history.
The separation between philosophy as a tool and philosophy as an ideology.
Exactly. You have the Organon era and then the state-sponsored philosophy era.
Let's talk about the first one, the Organon era. What was philosophy back then?
Well, it wasn't a belief system. It was definitely not a worldview. It was a rigorous toolkit for thinking, the ars cogitandi, the art of thinking.
It was engineering for argument.
Exactly. So what was the philosopher actually doing?
The function was incredibly specific, very ground level. The precise definition of terms, the correct placement of premises, what we're calling axioms or universal language,
Right.
identifying the logical leap in an induction,
Yeah.
and establishing the effective range of a deduction. It was just structural analysis, pure and simple.
And this is exactly what you see in the medieval university model, where philosophy wasn't the end goal. It was the mandatory prerequisite, right?
Correct. You had passed through the Faculty of Arts, which was mandatory before you could move on to theology or law or medicine. And the training was fundamentally in the structural analysis of arguments and intense rebuttal training, the disputatio.
So you weren't learning what to believe. You were learning how an argument was built.
In that era, the philosopher was a technician or an engineer. They were ensuring the structural integrity of arguments, not acting as an ideological hero or a moral guide.
That's the crucial distinction.
And then you have the dramatic shift, Era 2, state-sponsored philosophy. This really solidifies around the idealists we just discussed, Kant, Fichte, Hegel, and it's perfected in 19th century Germany.
So the hammer that was designed to build walls suddenly decided it was the cathedral.
That is a perfect analogy. The purpose changed completely. It wasn't about analyzing structure anymore. It was about articulating the specific morality, order, or meaning required by the state or the community.
And then presenting that to the world as universal, undeniable truth.
This makes philosophy the successor apparatus to religion. It provides the necessary cultural and political justification.
It absolutely became the successor apparatus to religion. Philosophical claims were sanctified, they became worldviews or systems, and if you criticized them, you weren't just challenging an argument.
No, you were labeled as immature, uninformed, or even immoral. You were failing the worldview.
Which brings us all the way back to what we're doing right now in this deep dive. We are not engaging in philosophical criticism. We're not making a value judgment about Descartes or Hegel. We're simply classifying their arguments into type 2, the state-sponsored justification type.
Exactly. It's an Aristotelian act of structural analysis. We're pulling philosophy down from this realm of sanctified belief and putting it back on the desk as a tool. This isn't philosophical critique. It's a return to philosophy's original operational purpose.
So why is this kind of structural analysis so compelling right now? I mean, why should the person listening care about 17th century rationalists or 19th century German idealists?
Because the traditional justification systems, the state, organized religion, the grand political ideologies, they're all visibly breaking down as justification devices in our modern era.
They don't have that automatic universal appeal they once did.
Right. But the need for universal language hasn't gone away. Ambition still requires camouflage.
Of course.
So the need for justification has just migrated to new language. New universal words have taken their place in our rhetoric. Human rights, environment, safety, diversity, justice, equity. These terms now carry the absolute moral weight that reason or God's will once did.
And this means we need that Organon question, the structural analysis question, now more than ever. We have to ask for every policy, every platform, every argument, how is this claim built?
Where is the induction coming from?
Yeah.
What is the motive hiding behind this universal word?
Let's take a quick example.
Okay. If a government proposes a new regulation that limits personal economic choice, and they use the universal word safety to justify it, the three-step framework immediately applies.
Okay, so the motive might be economic control or resource reallocation.
The universal language is safety, and the justification is that, therefore, any resistance to this new regulation is inherently reckless or dangerous.
Making the personal control seem necessary for the collective good.
It gives you the language to label dissent as immorality, just like Hegel's system labeled dissent as immaturity.
So the structural knowledge we've gained today is this. Philosophy isn't some noble academic pursuit. It is fundamentally the technique of hiding ambition with words.
And we established the two eras. Philosophy was either a structural tool for analysis, or it was a study that forgot it was a tool and became a justification device.
And now we are collectively reopening the forgotten toolshed. This exercise is a resumption of philosophy's original purpose, the dispassionate analysis of arguments regardless of how noble they sound.
That three-step structure is still operating today, whether you're reading an academic paper or just scrolling through a heated online debate.
Every single universal claim, even the ones around justice or human rights, it starts with a personal desire, I want this outcome, and then it's followed by placing an undeniable word, like safety or equality, on top of it to justify the action.
Know the structure. Know the mechanism. The only freedom remaining for you is to recognize that the argument you're being presented with is a carefully constructed machine. It was built by someone who wanted something specific.
The choice is yours. Recognize the mechanism and then choose. Choose whether you'll continue to think with the tools you've been given or start thinking with the tools you've just rediscovered.
This program is provided by Universal Genesis.